Hey, I hope everybody's doing good, staying healthy. You guys are making the best out of this quarantine. I just wanted to give you guys a part two today to our topic on governors in the coronavirus, right? And one of the stranger things that's happening, right, is that there's a conflict brewing between the president of the United States and between the liberal democratic governors, right, in the United States. And I touched on this a couple of weeks ago, but it's gaining a lot more steam, and it definitely sheds light on our topic, really, of how much power do governors have in American politics. Well, so to kind of rehash a little bit, you guys have probably heard about this or been following that the respective governors are claiming the right to be able to decide when the economy reopens. That means the governors get to decide when social distancing ends, when people are allowed to gather in larger groups, when schools get to open, when bars get to reopen, restaurants, etc. Now, the governors are claiming the right, particularly governors like Cuomo, Jared Polis, right, in Colorado, and Governor Newsom, right, Gavin Newsom in California. And they're all claiming that it's up to them when the economy's open. And they haven't given exact dates, but they're arguing that it should be sometime in late May, even going into June is when the proper time is for the economies to open. And more importantly, they want the entire determination when the economy's open to be based purely on science and medicine, right? Now, Donald Trump, right, has been saying that he has the right to override all of the governors, right? This is in the last 48 hours. Donald Trump is saying he has the right to override any of the governors, and that if he wants to reopen the economy, he can do that at any point. He suggested that he would try and open it as early as May 1st, right? At least a month before most of the medical industry and medical professionals are saying it's even remotely safe. Donald Trump, in one of his more extreme, perhaps, comments, said that as president of the United States, he, quote unquote, has absolute authority, right? Which, of course, made many of the governors many of the governors pause for a second and say, you don't have absolute authority. There's a thing in the Constitution, and we talked about this, guys, right, called the 10th Amendment, which says that any powers not given to the federal government in the Constitution rest with the individual states. So therefore, this entire decision really rests with the individual governors. So this is definitely setting up an interesting showdown between the liberal governors and then obviously the very conservative Donald Trump. And his argument why he wants to open the economy is obviously an economic one, right? He's citing the fact that, quote unquote, Americans' rights are being infringed by not being able to work. And therefore, and he says that this whole economic disaster facing Americans is unwarranted, and that governors have badly overstepped their own authority. And he's actually accused the governors of using their power to obstruct the economy. Now, of course, the governors are saying, public health should take reign over the economy, and therefore that's where they're claiming their power from, right? So definitely interesting that this is all happening right now. Now, this does raise some questions. How far should the power of the governors go? Have they and I ask you guys this question, have they overstepped their authority? Many conservatives, right, argue that the governors have actually been engaging in what they call tyranny. I have had a couple of close friends who actually make this exact argument that they don't perceive Donald Trump as being tyrannical. They perceive the governors as tyrannical for forcing businesses to shut down to deal with the public health crisis. Right now, on the other side, many liberals are saying that Donald Trump is quite tyrannical because he's trying to force the governors to reopen the economy, even if they disagree. So I'm just curious what you guys all think about that. Which side do you kind of come down more on, maybe down in the middle? And another development that's really interesting that's been happening is that many of the states in the North and in the West have been forming alliances against Donald Trump. So Massachusetts, trying to get this right, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, and New Jersey have all in the last couple of days, all 7 governors came together and formed what's called a special compact. It's basically like an alliance. And they're all going to coordinate together when their economies are going to reopen. And they've all agreed that they're going to band together in resistance against the federal government if the federal government tries to move on them before they believe that they're ready to reopen the economies and before it's safe. Donald Trump calls this compact in the Northeast, quote, treasonous, and as a resistance against him, right? Similar compacts are now being formed in liberal states in the West, right? So California, right? Oregon, Washington, right? Are all forming alliances as well. And they're going to coordinate when they're going to open the economy. And they have promised that they're going to band together even against the resistance of Donald Trump. So this is basically, guys, it's interesting. This is setting up a showdown between the federal government on one hand and the states on the other, right? Which has been a classic play out through American history. We looked at this in class, right, guys? Marijuana was a big issue where there's been a showdown between the states and the feds. Gun control, right? Environmental rollbacks by the Trump administration has set off resistance between the states and the federal government. This is just the latest showdown between the two, but it's obviously high stakes because the health is at stake. And you could argue, if you kind of argue the more conservative position, people's jobs are at stake too, right? So, it's an interesting one here, right? So, should these governors have the right to form these compacts? Should the governors be coordinating when they open the economy? Does the president have the authority, do you think, to override the individual states? In your mind, what comes first? Does public health come first? If so, you might argue with the governors in the states, or does the state of the economy come first? And you can make an argument on that end too. There are now, there's unprecedented among of people out of work now. It's up to nearly 20 million people have lost their jobs just in the last 3.5 weeks. So you could make an argument over there too, but this is definitely another classic clash over the interpretation of what we call federalism, right? Where does power rely, with the federal governments or with the states? And so far, the governors, right, have showed very little fear of taking on the Trump administration on this issue. And you could argue that this is just the latest of that huge partisan divide between conservatives and liberals just coming home to roost, right? And it's unfortunate that it's coming home to roost on one of the biggest issues, a public health issue that's now already led to, 30,000 deaths in the United States and counting. Maybe we shouldn't be playing politics, with this kind of issue. But anyhow, just to get your thoughts about it. And, we'll continue on. So I hope you guys are all well. Be peaceful. Take care of yourselves. Bye.